Howdy ho, good neighbors. What's going on? It's Phil Russert, and we are Creatorcon Q&A, episode 136. We are continuing our writer and editor campaign here. We always get artists, but it's nice to talk to writers and editors and really get behind the scenes as to what starts and sparks it all. Tonight we have an awesome guest. He's a president. He's a COO. He's a writer. He's an editor. He's been in the industry for 30 years, worked with some of the best, produced some great content himself. Without further ado, President COO of Top Cow Comics, it is Matt Hawkins.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me, Phil.
What's going on? Hey Gilbert. Gilbert says hi.
Hey Gilbert.
Thanks for coming out, man. I appreciate it. You've been in the industry for a long time, and you're behind the scenes a lot. And there's people who know you are, and there's some people that maybe don't realize how much you contribute to their wonderful comic collection. So tonight we're gonna get into it.
Cool.
So you started, what was it, like 1993 in comics, right?
Yeah, in May of '93, I went to the Mile High Comics opening in Anaheim, California, and I met Rob Liefeld and Eric Stevenson, and Extreme Studios were there, and Rob hired me on the spot.
Wow. Now, you weren't part of the comics industry or even a comic collector prior to that, right? You were a banker.
No, I was I was a teller.
Oh, okay.
I was working a menial job to pay my way through college, so I was not I was not an investment banker. I was the sap there in my suit, asking people to make their deposits. And I did not like that job, and it was not fun. And and I met Rob Liefeld at the signing. My nephew had asked me to take him to get his comic book signed. You're right. I didn't collect comics. I was at UCLA studying to get my master's and had planned on going into the scientific field, kind of following my father's footsteps. And
physics, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
he
was an engineer for the military for a number of years.
Oh, well, thank you for his service. And you have that new book out too, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
So you meet Rob Liefeld, and he hires you to do what?
Initially, I was hired to do marketing work. The guy right in front of me, there were two guys right in front of me, Cedric Nocon, Jonathan Sabal, and it may have been Marlo Akiza as well. But they were all artists that were showing Rob Liefeld their portfolio, and they waited in this long line with me. And in the front they were right in front of me, and they were talking about, so in the 2.5 hours I waited in this line, it was a long line. Early image days were kind of a boom. And by the time I got to the front of the line, these artists had explained to me what image was, why it should matter, who Rob Liefeld was. I had an education, and Rob hired these guys on the spot, which is honestly why I then asked him if he was looking for anyone to do any other kind of work. Because if that had not happened, I don't think I would have asked that question. I was sort of half joking, because when I walked into the room where they were all, there were these bunch of young, good-looking guys with a bunch of good-looking girls, and they were all wearing these black leather Extreme Studios jackets, and looked like they're having the time of their life. And I was full-time at school, full-time at work, and my life kind of sucked, and I needed something, and it was fun to, and I got into it, and 30 years later, never looked back. It's been 30 years. It'll be 30 years this May.
So you threw away a bank teller career for this?
Well, I have, I would have had to finish my degree. I have a master's, and I've never used it for anything other than writing Think Tank and Stairway and a few other sci-fi books.
I was going to say that does come in handy, though, because writers have to do a lot of research, and you have a lot in that field.
Yeah, that's the one real advantage I've had is I'm able to read the science journals. So I get the American Physical Papers, I get Nature, I get Discovery, I get all these magazines, and I read them. And 99% of it is just boring. But there's about 1% of it you'll read through, and you'll be like, that is really interesting. Like, that's where I got the idea for the Project Stairway. I was reading a journal, and it talked in, I think it was 2011 or 12, about how some guys at Harvard had figured out a way to store information on DNA, like a hard drive, so that you could, in theory, insert information into someone's body and then recover it later. And so given that, I came up with the idea that our junk DNA was actually something that someone had inserted all this information into 10 billion years ago, and we needed to figure out what that said.
Very cool. Now, you write in volumes, right? Like collected volumes where like issue arcs, like 5-issue arcs, and you do a volume 2 and things like that?
Yeah, I tend to write in 4 to 6 issue arcs. 4 is kind of my sweet spot. I kind of like the 4-issue arc. And because I originally liked the $10 trades, that price point has kind of gone the way of the dodo. But
Yeah.
the $16.99, the $24.99, whatever they are, I write in different types of arcs. I actually like writing original graphic novels. I like comics. I've been reading them now for 30 years, and I collect them too. I have a huge collection, but I prefer reading full stories. So I buy trades a lot. I don't buy individual 32-page comics very often. I mean, I got Batman, Mark's new Batman, and some other stuff, but for the most part, I buy books and trades.
So, I mean, you weren't into comics. You started obviously talking about 30 years ago, but you got into comics. Um, what made were you intimidated at the thought of writing? What sparked you to start writing comics?
Well, I started as a marketing guy. So Rob hired me to do marketing and letters pages, and then I sort of branched into editorial when Rob created the Maximum Press imprint. He had Extreme Studios, which had Youngblood, Newman, and some other projects, and Eric Stevenson ran that line. And he wanted to do a new line of books, including Battlestar Galactica, Evangeline, and some other stuff. And he asked me if I'd consider editing and running that line of books, and I did. And so from 94 to 96, I ran that line of books. It was a lot of fun. People forget about the Battlestar Galactica book that we did, but there's no question in my mind that Rob basically essentially wrote the story that the new Battlestar Galactica series was made on. If you read Rob's The Enemy Within graphic novel he did, it basically lays out the story that Ron Moore did 8 years later.
But now, how do you deal with that? You're with the big leagues. You're with superstars of the industry. And at that time, they were like really celebrity superstars. It was booming. And you're the editor. I mean, are you intimidated? Because as the editor, you got to make the tough calls, the tough choices. You have to be on them for deadlines. This doesn't make sense, or this background isn't right, or so you've got to be kind of a voice of authority. Now, how did that work with you being new to not just the industry, but editing when you're working with these big names?
Well, I think when you start out and at that age, a lot of the early image editors, well, I can only speak for myself, but a lot of us were not really editors. We were more traffickers, and so we would just traffic pages around. And for the most part, Rob and all of his early projects kind of did his own stuff. I didn't actually edit any of Rob's work. That was mainly Stevenson. But, I worked with guys like John Stensman and various other ones. And a lot of those guys had come up with me, so we came up together. And since Eric and I were the two sort of semi-authority figures outside of Rob at Extreme, so people listened to us, And it took me a while, and I took it very seriously, and I really studied and figured it out, and as a writer, I hate getting notes from people, especially from people in film and TV, where the notes are clearly stupid, and it's just someone giving notes because they have to.
Right.
But I often don't give notes at all. If I read a script and I think it's fine, I just call people and say, hey, I think it's fine. Great, good job. I no one is paying me to give notes, so if it's not needed, I don't use it. But there's times when you get in there. I think as an editor, my main strategy has always been to ask questions rather than making statements. Like I'll ask a guy a question or a woman a question. I'll say, hey, what's the tone of this? Did you mean to shift the tone here at this part of the storyline? Or I'll say, I'll ask them, did you realize that scene is 14 pages? You need to break that up. There are a lot of little things. It depends on who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a more established talent, it's a little more nuanced. If you're dealing with someone new, a lot of times they don't know what the panel borders are. They need a lot of help. So it depends on the level of the person. So.
Well, I think it's a good, interesting approach too. The asking the question as opposed to making a statement, and it'll build a good relationship, make them comfortable.
Well, and what that is with writers specifically, because I do edit authors, but I mean artists, but I have Mark Silvestri work with me, and everyone listens to him that's an artist. You know what I mean? So for a lot of times when there are notes given on art, he will email or call someone or make a change, and they never question sort of his ideas. They just make the change. But in terms of writers, I work with writers a lot, and I ask a lot of questions. But the big thing for me on a writer is I want the writer to believe that they're making the change because they think it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And I want them to believe that it was their idea. I don't give a fuck if people think that, I gave them that idea or I made this change. For me, it's all about the project itself. And I want to support my writers. And as an editor, I have no ego involved. I just want the book to be good.
Well, that's where the ego should be, right? Best product possible.
Right.
The best story, the best book. Absolutely. So you went into writing, and you've written a lot of titles. I mean, we got Lady Pendragon and Aphrodite 9 and Swing, which does very well. Think Tank, Postal, The Clay People, Colossus, Warframe, Samaritan, Ninth Generation. I mean, you've got a ton of books under your belt.
Yeah, I've
Um,
written a lot.
when you started writing, I mean, were there any writer influences that you really focused on and how they wrote scripts, or how did you start the process, being that you were never into this before?
Well, one of the earliest people I edited was, believe it or not, Alan Moore, and he was on War
Oh,
Child and
totally.
Judgment Day at the early Extreme offices, and I was his editor on the War Child book. So he was sending me these scripts, and I was reading them in the denseness of these scripts, and it was pretty intense actually working with Alan, and he's just this crazy genius level guy. And when From Hell came out, From Hell was the book that was kind of lightning in a bottle for me, because I realized, first off, it wasn't a superhero thing. Never
Right.
been a big superhero fan. Not that I don't see the value of superheroes. They're just not for me. I've always found it to be kind of silly. I understand the appeal of them, but for me, it's just I don't like. A book like From Hell is infinitely better than Watchmen to me. And what I really liked about From Hell was that Alan had done a ton of research and had really, in the back of the book, he had included sort of intensive notes of what he wrote, why he made the choices he made. And I really, really liked that. And so when I did Think Tank, I did the same thing. I did a science class in the back. I explained my research. I did that. And it just became a thing. With Swing, I do sex ed. And with Ty, I did Sunday school. I just create these sort of materials in the back. And if people want to do a deep dive into the content, they can jump in and do it with me.
Yeah, I don't think people realize writing isn't just you sit down and get to make believe and make things up. You have to do research. You have to understand whether it's a period piece or a specific subject matter, or even minor details about the proper weapon that a military person would use, or terminology, right? Or if you're in a
Right.
clinical setting, and it takes a lot of research and time to write. And meanwhile, here you are with 15 books or more, but while you're editing and president and all that, what would you say is the book that you're most proud of that you've written?
Um, wow, that's a tough one. Think Tank, probably. It's always been my, there's an interesting corollary that my favorite work is also my least selling work. My best selling work is always tend to be the work that I personally have been the least, I don't want to say the least passionate about, but there's like Think Tank I was really into, and I spent a lot of time writing those books, and it was a lot of effort, and for a nominal amount of sales versus a book like Swing that I'll write in a week and sell a bazillion copies in 27 different languages.
And Aphrodite sold really well too.
Yes.
That's a big seller, isn't it?
Yeah, Aphrodite was huge.
Now, I remember I thought I saw you post to say something about how you'd love to get back to a Lady Pendragon fantasy tale. Is that something that you might be doing in the future, or?
Not an Arthurian one. I think the problem with the Arthurian stuff is it's a deep dive again, and I don't have the time to do it right now. And I think people don't realize that when you do that intensive of a research, it doesn't stay with you. I mean, how many of us remember things from certain college classes?
Right.
I did all that Arthurian research in 1994 and 5, and I've not read any of it since. I mean, I remember a lot of it, but I don't remember enough of it or the details in order to sit down and write a book. And that was the last book that I researched pre-internet. And the internet has changed everything. Whereas I spent 6 months researching that book, and I went over to England and bought a bunch of books and
Oh wow.
tracked down tapes of things I had to watch. But now on a book, it's all online. You don't have to go anywhere. The
That's
internet's
nice.
an amazing thing.
That's a nice thing.
Yeah.
Real quick, we've got Roy Mercado. Hi, Phil and Matt. Hey, Phil and Matt. And Jim O'Reilly. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey guys.
Any artists that are in the chat, stick around. We're going to talk about the talent hunt, which you really don't have a lot of time, but I don't know if you've been following it. Maybe you want to check it out. So stay with us on that. You just not too long ago, I don't even remember if it was a year or two ago. No, it was like a year ago. You had less than a year ago. You had the Cyberforce Kickstarter. It was the retro Cyberforce. I'm going to tell you, I love Cyberforce. It was one of my favorite books. I mean, not just because Mark is my favorite artist, but it was reminiscent of the fun that comics were to me. Um,
Right.
Now I know there was another relaunch of it, not like 8 years ago or something like that. But are there any thoughts on a new top? I mean, a new uh, wow, I'm losing it. My apologies.
New Cyberforce.
There you go, Cyberforce book with the original cast, because I'd love to see Mark drawing the original cast again, and you involved in the book again, and I know we don't usually harken back to what was. We try to revamp it and make it new, but I do. I mean, I think there's a whole slew of readers dying for some nostalgia.
Right. Well, fortunately we have the ability to print it again. I mean, that's the most advantageous thing for nostalgia is reprinting old content. I mean, I don't know that we could recreate that stuff today in the same sort of vibe. I mean, it was of its time and it was of its place and it was of its era. I mean, I look at that Cyberforce thing and I look at the beginnings of computer coloring and I look at how much better it is now. And
Right.
I look at Mark and myself and all of us, and we're significantly better creatives on what we're doing. I don't know. I mean, I think Mark liked what we did in 2012 with Cyberforce. He has plans that continue on. I mean, we did that all the way up to 2016, I think it was. So it was a lengthy run of that. But in terms of doing an original Cyberforce with the original cast and trying to make it look like the original book, probably unlikely.
But do you have plans for other Kickstarters for the nostalgia? The other.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Uh,
going to collect all of the Cyberforce, all the Witchblade, and all the Darkness. There's like I think that's between just those 3 titles, it's another 9 Kickstarters.
that's fantastic.
So that's
Have
free.
you? Yeah, this is a little off your subject, but have you or Mark ever thought of doing your own artist edition of Mark's pages? You know how like IDW is doing the artist editions, right? With all these
Yes, yes,
properties.
we are doing those. The problem, we can't do it on some of the original materials. We don't have the black and whites. So
Oh,
there
that's too
probably will
bad.
be one on Mark's Batman. We've already discussed that, but any of the old Cyberforce or any of that stuff is not going to happen because we don't have the original art files in black
Oh,
and
that's
white.
a shame. That's a shame. That brings us, right now, Mark is writing and drawing, and I have to say, I'm really impressed with what Mark's been writing. And he's honestly, and I'm not saying anything bad about Jim Lee or these other artists, but they get a lot of accolades. Mark is that quiet legend. I mean, you don't, I don't know if he gets the same buzz as Jim Lee, but yet he's the one artist that has just gotten better and better and better over the years. I mean, as great as he was, he's phenomenal.
Right.
And there's a big thank you to you in the book. So, what was your role that you played in getting Deadly Duo out there?
Well, when we started doing it a few years ago, I worked with Mark, and he wrote I was his editor for the most part. I mean, they didn't credit me editorially, but I was in essence Mark's editor for the 5 years he was working on it.
And I
Because
know that for a fact because you were going over his pages. I remember.
yeah, no, there just were the problem was there were multiple different DC editors over that time period because they had multiple iterations of the company, and so I think we had 4 different editors at DC. Ben Mirez is the editor now, and I really like him. He's doing a nice job and he's very helpful. But no, Mark, I'd go over his scripts with him and give him some thoughts and some notes, and I know his wife was helping him traffic some pages too. So I think that's why they gave us both that credit in there.
Well, I mean, again, don't downplay it, right? I mean, those things are important for the book to look as professional and good as it is, because you could be a creator and you could even be a great editor yourself, but when you're too close to a project, you need that other set of eyes. So that's very valuable. So, I mean, you went from physicist slash bank teller to working with legends in the industry, writing your own books, and now you're working with crossovers with DC and DC properties. I mean, do you ever look back and go, "Wow, man, that one moment totally derailed like where I thought I was going to go"? And are you happy with the trajectory it's taken?
Yes, I think about that a lot because I have 2 sons and I have this conversation with them. My one son is in film school here at USC, and we talk a lot about film and entertainment. And I tell him often that he needs to pay attention to opportunities because the universe will open up doors for all of us, but most of us don't notice it. I mean, I had an opportunity there with Rob Liefeld at that point in 1993 that there were 100 people in line in front of me. Not one of them asked for a job.
Not just that, but my understanding is he asked you if you had experience in that
Yeah, I
um,
lied.
yeah, you just said yeah. You
Well, not only see, the thing is, I lied, and then I actually went and did the research because he
Right.
asked me if I knew how to write press releases, and I said yes. So I went and bought a book on how to write a press release, and then I wrote a press release as if I was writing a press release for that signing he did at Mile High, and I faxed it to him. He hired me right away.
See, I mean, it's recognizing the door, the open door, and it's having the balls to go through. You could have choked and said, "Well, I don't really," and that would have been the end of it.
Yeah. No, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I think what Rob, and I've talked to Rob about this because I was a very inexperienced guy for what he hired me to do, but I learned very quickly. He told me he just thought I had spunk. He liked that I had spunk and that I was aggressive and that I could talk intelligently to people. And he, a lot of the guys that were early part of Extreme were a bunch of comic nerds. They were very much a bunch of comic nerds. And so he liked having someone that had sort of an alternative point of view, honestly, I didn't gel well with a lot of the Extreme guys for a while. It took a while. I get along with all those guys now, but in the beginning there was some ruffled feathers.
Well, I'm sure Marat and Norm and all of them were probably partying and having a blast and doing the rock star life. And here you are, Mr. Suit and Tie, physicist, bank teller, trying to get the work done and take it seriously. And you're new to it, right? Was that like
Yeah.
the dichotomy that was going on, or?
Well, it was just weird because these guys they never really had like real jobs. None of them. I mean,
Right.
Rob worked for Marvel, so he was used to that kind of thing. But none of the guys that Rob hired, for the most part, most of them were new, like me. And it's weird because I realized I was in school when I got hired. So I've I'm a 53-year-old guy. I've never made a resume.
That's actually pretty awesome.
I realized that the other day because I realized someone asked. I was doing some consulting work, and they asked me if I had a resume, and I said, what? I've never made one.
But you would go buy a book and learn how to make a resume right now if you had to.
Yeah. Well, for the consulting work, that's what the guys over in Abu Dhabi, they did hire me. And I basically talked to them, and they realized once they talked to me that I knew what I was talking about. But, I mean, a resume is a piece of paper. That's all it is.
By the way, we've got Aaron Bess. He says, biggest big dog in this MF.
Right on.
Evie Cantata. Hello, Matt and Phil. Hello. And Kenny, who's Kenster in the building. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. We'll address them. So let me ask you, and this might have to suspend a little humility here, but Image obviously changed the industry. It had a big influence on it. But Top Cow specifically, I mean, you guys introduced Mike Turner to the world, David Finch. Some artists, that are so big, rest his soul, Michael Turner. He's of course considered a legend, though. Died too young. But what do you think Top Cow's impact has been on the industry as a whole? Between the artists you've brought up, writers. You and I talked before the show. Some writers just through the contest, and of course the IPs that have become iconic.
Well, that's a big question, but I think for the most part, Top Cow's impact has been on the computer coloring and artists field. I think we have Brian Haberlin and Richard Isnov and Steve Furkow essentially created computer coloring along with Steve from Oleopolis and a couple other people. I mean, there were no computer coloring before 1992, so those guys in essence created the industry, and it's the norm now. So the standard of what we see in the pages now was created by a bunch of guys 30 years ago. And prior to that, there were these women in Ireland that hand colored comics, and that's how they were done, and I've seen pictures, but I'd never had a book that I worked on with those people. And you look at the evolution, you talk about Cyberforce. To me, I look at Cyberforce and I love it. It's nostalgic, but I look at it as kind of early coloring. I mean, if we color that now, it would look very different.
Agreed, but you know what it is I also, because I was collecting since I was 9 and I'm 50 years old, that was the big jump for me.
Right.
When, we were on newspaper print, hand colored, and then all of a sudden, wow. I mean, this was like IMAX for me, in theaters, So even though we've progressed since then, it's just recognizing what was my experience as the change. It was just unbelievable. And the boom.
Now, but Mark's an artist who, he hired Mike Turner and Dave Finch to be his background artist. I mean, right. He trained them by hand. So, I mean, Silvestri, trained Billy Tan, Dave Finch, Kucha, Mike Choi, Mike Turner. I mean, Joe Benitez. I mean, you go down the list of these artists, it's like a who's who of top talent today, and a lot of people came and went through those doors and were influenced by Silvestri. I think a lot of Top Cow's impact will primarily be because of Silvestri's influence on the art.
Now, I always say you can name like 100 artist legends from before 2000, but can you name any legends that have spurned after 2000? Because I feel like the industry really shifted hard after Image. Forgive me if this is a hard question, but do you think with Image doing what it did, it scared the hell out of DC and Marvel to not have it repeat? So now they're really trying to keep the artists from being the motivation for people to buy books, and they want they're really focusing on the IP. I mean, I know when you go overseas, there's the exchange rate, so it's a cheaper page rate for them, etc. But do you also think there's something about that they won't be superstars in the States necessarily?
I don't know. I mean, the only person I can think of that's become a superstar recently is Stefan Sejic, and he did that kind of on his own velocity. But I don't know if Marvel and DC is specifically trying to prevent superstars. I don't think that's the case because they hire top tier talent all the time, And so if you look at their top 10, 15 books, it's all done by, the elites in the industry. I mean, Mark Silvestri's Batman book is out now. For second issue comes out, I think, next week.
Yeah, honestly, book one was really, really good. I don't really collect new books anymore, but it was Mark. I had to pick it up. And I was very impressed. I enjoyed the read. I enjoyed the sequential work. And again, he's just gotten so much better, even with his storytelling sequentially.
Yeah.
His use of camera angles, close-ups, the splashes he did, just amazing work.
Yeah.
So number 2 is coming out next week, and how many issues is this?
It's a 7-issue series, and the 7th issue is a double-sized, and the art's done. So he's just working on scripts and covers now, but so it shouldn't be late.
Very cool. So now, I mean, you worked closely with Mark for a long time, but were you impressed with how well the writing was? I mean, I know he's written before and you've worked with him, but it just seems like he's really taken a notch up.
Yeah, I think he has. I think Batman was one of these things where this was like the story he's wanted to tell his whole life, and he really likes Batman. And like for me, I think someday I'll tell a Conan or an Elder Elric story. Those are the sort of the ones I've got that I want to do. Like I've had a Conan story I've wanted to tell for about 25 years, but someday I'll be able to tell it. But
we got a petition, guys. Let Marvel know. We got to get Matt Hawkins to write a Conan crossover or something.
Yeah,
that would be awesome. So that was going to be one of my questions is what is a title that is on your wish list to write? Besides Conan, is there any other title that is like your go-to? In my bucket list, I'd love to write this.
I think that's it. I like fantasy. I'm working on a fantasy book now. I like Star Wars and Star Trek, but I don't really want to contribute to that. They both feel like they're kind of a mess to me. I don't know. I mean, I get involved in stuff sometimes. Like I'm involved now. I got involved with Warframe, and I get involved in some video game stuff here and there. Honestly, it's just people hire me to do various jobs, and I don't do a lot of work for hire, but a lot of video game. I'm a big time gamer, so when I get involved in stuff like that, it's kind of fun.
Very cool. Now, I read somewhere, were you also dealing with producing, for films and like dealing with production of films and TV and things like that?
Not the production, but the sales of. Yeah, I mean, I still do that now, where we'll go pitch projects for film or TV. I mean, right now Mark's pitching something on his own. I've pitched Postal recently. It just depends on the project. So I've written like Postal. I originally wrote as a TV pilot, and when it didn't sell, I wrote it as a comic instead. And since then, we've sold it 3 times as a TV show. So who knows if it'll actually ever get made. But film and TV, I don't really like working in, honestly, because it's just too many cooks. There's too many people involved, and there's so many notes. I wrote for 2 years on the Power Rangers back in 2004 and 2005. I worked on Space Patrol Delta and Magic Ranger.
I didn't know that. Oh wow!
And wrote a bunch of episodes for that, and it was fun to have my name on some TV stuff, but I hated the work. You know, it's not just because it was Power Rangers, but just the amount of notes you get, the changes they make to your work even after they pay you and you're done.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't realize some of the changes they made until I saw it air. You know, 'cause it's not like they
Oh,
keep you in
wow.
the loop. You know, like there was one episode I wrote that they changed everything. I still got teleplay credit by, which I kind of wish I hadn't. You know, because
I was going to ask you.
yeah, you know, I mean, that's where you see some of this stuff that gets changed, and you just like writers a lot of time get blamed for stuff, and I'm sure most of the time it's correct that writers write shitty stuff, but a lot of times writers do stuff that other people fuck with, and it's not pleasant.
Well, when you have producers and investors, and you've got the production company, they're the ones throwing out all the money, and they
Right.
feel they've got their investors and their shareholders to cater to. They'll do whatever they want to do. That they have the rights. So that can be frustrating, I'm sure, as a writer. I hope to have that frustration someday, but but Will asked, how do you see Image responding to the indie scene growing in popularity? Do you see the company looking for new ways to attract talent?
Oh, well, we do the talent hunt, and Image is always looking for new content. So I don't think we're doing anything special or different than we already have, because Image has always been about attracting new writers and artists for the most part. And we have tons. I mean, there's so many people that pitch us all the time, and you know, like the Top Gal Talent Hunt is really the only way that I specifically try to help out and help curate new people and break them into the industry. The problem we've ultimately had, which is why when you look at like Teenie Howard, Stephanie Phillips, and some of these people, is when we bring them in, we don't really have a lot of work to give them. You know, Top Gal only puts out 3-4 books a month at most, and most of those are developed internally and written internally, so we don't need outside writers.
So I got a question from Keith, and then we're going to get into the talent hunt for those who don't know what he's talking about. He said, "Hi, Matt. I met you back in the 90s at Wizard World Chicago, and you were so nice to talk to."
Thanks, man. Been the Wizard World, Rosemont. That's some good memories. It's weird. It's weird now when I think about it, because I forget about Wizard Magazine, because it was such a huge part of the industry for the first 10 years that I was in it. But it's been gone for 20 years now, and you know, and towards the last, it was, I don't know, it kind of was a pale version of itself. But things are so different now, and I don't know. I can't figure out if I like it better now or back then. I genuinely don't know. The thing I do like is I've never been a huge collectible guy. You know, I mean, I understand the collectible aspect of our business, the CGC graded slab things, but I like to read things, you know, and for me, it's all about reading the stuff. And, you know, that's why I read trades and I read digital. I don't have, you know, 40 long boxes of comics in my house. In fact, I think I have a half of one long box, and it's only my own stuff, because everything else I have on iPads and I read digital, and I have 6 or 7 shelves full of hardcovers and trades, but I don't have 32-page comics. I've never been a fan.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the CGC, because I honestly, I'm not a big fan of that either. I don't want my comic in a coffin. The idea is for a comic to be opened and read, but I also think we're in for a real surprise, because the whole point of CGCing and slabbing is to bring value and maintain the integrity of older books that are rare or falling apart. But when we're slabbing all these new books now, there isn't going to be any rarity to them unless the print run was really low. And I think you're spending all this money to slab it, and there's going to be no return. And do you think there's a comparison to the boom that's going on now with the prices, et cetera, that there was in the 90s, before the 90s kind of imploded a bit?
It's always been there, though. I mean, people ask me this question. I'm like, there's always been the collectible aspect, whether it was that, whether it was variants, whether it was limited editions, it's always been there. Whether it's Funko Pops, you know, Pokemon. I mean, some people are always collecting something genre related, and people are chasing it. And you know, I can't tell you how often I've seen people go into comic stores and try to sell their collection, and they realize they can't sell it. So,
Right.
I mean, I think the people that are looking to make, you know, put their kid through college by buying The Death of Superman have come to realize that didn't happen. But here's the thing about the CGC slab graded is if you get a 9.8 or a 10.0, that is in a rarefied category. And the thing is, even a normal print run of a book, like let's say you print 10,000 copies of a book, if you send a few hundred to CGC, I mean, they might 9.8, 30 or 40 or 50 of them. You know what I mean? But it's based on the quality of the original book. So the thing is, if you do have a 9.8 or a 10 of a new title, I think that is worth something, you know, because it's what they're basically doing is they're creating a differentiated class. You know, there's a small amount of really pristine versions of this book that are available, but there's a lot of copies that are not, you know. So I don't know. Like I said, that's not we sell stuff and I make stuff for that business every day. Okay, but
Right.
you look around my house, I don't have any CGC slab graded anything on my walls. I know a lot of people do, but I don't.
Yeah, the only thing I have slabbed was I run conventions in New York, and everybody that was there, Scott Williams, Alex Sinclair, and them, they all signed it or did a little remark. And my friend, without me knowing, had gotten his done on a sketchbook, and he slabbed it for me. I mean, that I love having slabbed. But Sean asks, do you ever have any worries about people stealing your ideas?
No, not really, because there's 5 versions of everything already out there, so there are no new ideas, and it's all about execution and figuring out a way that you can do it. And people don't write like I do, so I write very different. So I'm not that worried about someone executing on something and trying to rip off my idea. I understand the fear of that. I think it's an unfounded fear for the most part, because people don't usually steal. People that steal ideas are not going to be able to make anything of themselves really anyway, and
Right.
the fun part of it for me is doing the research and coming up with the concepts in the beginning. And it's all about execution. One of the things about the Top Cow Talent Hunt, which I know we're talking about, is I've always been shocked at the number of scripts and stories that are exactly the same. And we've done 5 or 6 of these, so I've had a number of different, those Darkness, Postal, Witchblade, Aphrodite 9. I don't even remember. There have been so many of these. So I've read so many versions of these things, and a lot of them have the same story, the same idea, and it's just zeitgeist. People saw Namor in this film. I haven't seen it yet, but then they cross that over with something else, and then they saw this, they read this book, and that gives them this Jungian sort of collective unconsciousness idea that they think is theirs and theirs alone. And the reality of it is 500 other people have the exact same idea. It's a question of whether you can execute it faster and better than they can.
So speaking of the talent hunt, for those who are not aware, Top Cow Matt they do a very nice thing actually. Um, what they do is it's a year-long contest. It's not to get hired by Top Cow, but it's to get a shot at a one-shot book. Would you like to explain it, or would you I'll let
Sure.
you go
No, I
ahead.
mean, right now, what it is Cyberforce is what we're doing now. So the entry, it lasts about a year. It ends in November. And basically, writers submit a 20-page original story in that universe. And artists draw an 8-page sequence from one of the existing storylines. And then we find one artist and one writer that wins, and they get to draw a book and write a book that's published. The writer of the book that's published is usually the one they wrote. So I'm picking. That's, by the way, is one of the reasons why it's easy for me to pick the winners, because I'm picking scripts that basically I can hand to an artist. You know what I mean? I mean, if a script has come in, it's a good story idea, it's well done, well executed, and I can just immediately hand it over to an artist to draw. Those are the category of the people that I'm looking for, and for the winners. The artists are very easy to pick, and what I will do is I'll go through I think we have 600 or 700 artist submissions right now. I'm expecting about 1,000 by the time that it closes in 2 weeks. But I'll go through all those, and very quickly, I can look, and in about 5 seconds, I can tell whether or not they should be in the finals or not.
Yeah, and it's ending at the end of this month, so you only got like a little over a week, 2 weeks left. If this is new to you, that's the time you have. But I am going to say, just remember, don't waste anybody's time by doing a rush job and throwing it in there. All right? If you have the time to do solid sequentials and send them in, please do. But Matt is going to be going over like he said, 600 to 1,000 submissions. Please make sure you're sending quality and you're not ripping anybody off, and you're not, be original. Follow the script if you're an artist, and don't make Matt have to pull his hair out.
No, look, the ones that make me pull my hair out are the ones that just immediately go in the trash. There's the pile. Like I said, we usually narrow it down to about 10 or 15 or 20. And then those are the ones. That's actually the hard part. Narrowing it down from the mass quantity to the 10 or 15 or 20 finalists, and trying to pick one of those is actually a pain in the ass. It's a huge pain in the ass, because often there's 4 or 5 of those that could win. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's several of them. So then it's sort of all right. So which one do I pick and why? And often what I will do is, when I've gone through that many, I will hand those 5 or 10 off to someone else, like a Brian Hill or a Ryan Cady, and I'll say, hey, can you rank these for me?
Have you ever had it to where man, both these two people deserve to win, and I just don't know who to pick? I mean, and you had to give it the decision to somebody else, or?
No, usually we've done in the past, we've created runner-ups, and I've done that several times where there's been a winner and a runner-up. So if it's that close, we usually just add it in.
And what is the runner up? I mean, what do you wind up giving them?
Like, give them an 8-page, like a backup feature or something like that, because the winner draws the full 20-page story that the writer wrote, and they get paid for that. Both people get paid for that. It's not for free. And then we usually include a 6 to 8-page backup story in those. If you look at most of them, they have that, and that's usually a runner-up. We haven't had a runner-up every year, but we've had several of them.
And just to remind everybody, there are rules posted. You could also go to the Facebook page, the Top Cow Talent Hunt, but please read the rules all the way through. They really do answer every possible question you'd have, so you don't have to ask Matt.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell you, if you ask questions that are already in the rules, why would they believe you can follow a script? So just read all the rules.
I won't be including any more links in my thing, because that's the one thing. Is one of the links I included was scrapped, and so I can't tell you how many hundreds of people have emailed me or IM me and said, "Hey, this link doesn't work. What should I do?" And that's just crazy to me. So I will not include any more links in any of the future ones.
But again, it's a great thing that you guys do to try to give an opportunity. You mentioned names before of people that have won the contest and they're now in the industry. It was a good launching point.
Yep.
So this is something to take very serious. And I think it's an awesome thing you guys do. And you give enough time. I mean, it's a year.
Yeah.
So you give plenty of time for people to prepare and do properly what they need to do and do their due diligence. And this is your 6th?
Oh, I don't even know. It's not an annual thing. Everyone talks about our annual talent hunt, but it's actually every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
The first one we did was 2012. So I would say this is 5th one, maybe 6th. I don't know.
I think it's an awesome thing. Like I said, you can go to the Facebook page to check it out. Just make sure whatever you post is related to the contest only, please.
Yeah, I mean, if you just Google Top Cow Talent Hunt, it'll pop up.
Cool. Very cool. What can we expect in the future of Top Cow? I mean, obviously Mark is doing the DC Deli Duo right now. What do we have coming up to look forward to between you, between Mark, between other titles that Top Cow wants to put out?
Well, we're doing the one thing we're doing right now that we're most looking forward to is the reboots we're doing of Darkness and Witchblade both. We've never done that before, and I know reboot is kind of a bad word given the DC 52 of it all. But you know what we had decided to do with Witchblade? I actually wrote the last issue of Witchblade. If you look at Witchblade 185, it's the only issue I've ever written, and I wrote the last one. And I didn't think about it at the time, but that was kind of an honor, you know. And I like the fact that when we opened up Witchblade in 1996 with 95 with Witchblade 1, Sarah Pizzini was a 25-year-old woman, and when we ended it 20-some years later, she was a 45-year-old woman with a child. And so I felt like we sort of followed her travail in real time. Same thing with Jackie Estacado. But then we did a reboot of not a reboot. We did another Witchblade where we gave another bearer. Because originally our idea was we'll take and give the gauntlet and we'll give the darkness power to another bearer and we'll tell continued stories with other bearers. What we discovered is that people really wanted Sarah and Jackie, you know, especially Jackie over Sarah. So we decided to redo it. So Jackie and Sarah are now both in their early 20s. This is when they first are getting their powers. And it's forced us to really sort of evaluate some things because we realized there are certain things that we did that were sort of arbitrary. Because one of the questions I asked right away is I'm like, well, why does the power manifest when he's 21? Why? You know, and no one could give an answer for that. You know, I mean, it was just something we suggested. So I gave Mark the suggestion and he liked it and he's using it in the relaunch, is that Jackie's power only manifests the first time he kills someone. And it sort of ties into the power of the darkness. So, you know, the first time you murder someone was when the power manifests. And we'll see how it works out with Sarah. Sarah's being written by Marguerite Bennett, and she's doing a really nice job. In fact, I just got the 2nd issue script and I just read it tonight.
And when is like a projected time frame for these to come out and hit shelves?
Witchblade next year, Darkness the year after.
Very cool. And again, in the meantime, if you want that fixed, pretty soon they're going to be doing the campaigns for the first runs collected volumes. So that's cool.
Witchblade Volume 3 is next.
And you personally, you said you're working on a fantasy tale now. Is there can you tell us about that, or is there anything else?
Yeah, no, I'm working with an artist named Patrick Boutine on a fantasy book. Honestly, it's actually my Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I ran for 25 years that I turned into a turned into a storyline, including the characters that all my friends did. So it's essentially the D&D campaign I ran, and I'm excited about that. I really like the book, and Pat Boutine's artwork is amazing. He's a French artist that was doing fantasy work and French album work, and I found him and sort of started working with him. I'm also working on what else am I working on? I'm working on a book called Zero G, which is based on a video game. Working on I just finished Swing, so we're doing a spinoff of Swing called Swipe. Swipe is about online dating, Swipe, and so it's a spinoff of Sunstone and Swing. And I'm working on a new volume of Think Tank with Rasan because he wanted to. And I probably working on about 18 different things actually. It's but those are the big ones. The fantasy project is on the way. I just finished something that we have a book coming out in March called ARC, Animal Rights Coalition, and it is based on a guy I met who runs a sanctuary for pangolins in South Africa. He wanted to be involved in a comic book about poaching and kind of these things. So we created a character that's kind of like the Batman of the poaching world. And he is kind of fighting the Punisher of the poaching world, where not using that for ease, but like you have to give you an idea where the one guy has sort of a code against killing and he's trying to do things, but he's skirting the law, but he's still trying to do things the right way. And then there's another guy that used to work with him who's just out and out just killing these poachers and trying to take them down the hard way. So
cool. When's that due out?
March.
Oh, very cool. That's right around the corner.
And I actually have a quote from Jane Goodall for it, so I'm going to be looking forward to using that. So
my wife would love to hear. My wife is she's big into animal rights and preservation, and she actually almost went into that field. So that's fantastic.
Well, this is a love letter to that. The guy behind it actually runs a sanctuary and who funded it, and I'm excited about this book. It was drawn by Attilio Rojo, the guy who worked with me on a number of other projects, including Tithe. But he just finished it, so we're on to another project with him.
Fantastic. That sounds great. As far as the industry, we were talking earlier about where the industry is going. Manga right now is doing really, really well, and readership seems to be down on Western comics. I mean, I've talked to people who read manga, and I've gotten their ideas and reasons why they feel that the readership is high with manga and lower in the Western world. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't. Are those hard stats? Because to my knowledge, the reading of like Western and Eastern comics is about the same of what it's been for a while. Because I mean, manga's been popular for a significant period of time. In fact, the entire audience that reads books like Sunstone and Swing are women who were 15 when Tokyo Pop launched. And all the people who read those books are 35 to 50-year-old women for the most part, is the largest part of the audience. And when you poll those people, they read Fruit Basket, Shonen Jump, they read all the Japanese manga stuff in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And now they're older and they want more adult content. And so that's the market we're sort of servicing. But no, I think Western comics right now, given the digital comics right now, I imagine comics worldwide are being read more now. There's more readership than there's ever been.
Okay, cool. And I mean, you've reached to the point where you have books that have been printed in how many different languages all over the world. So do you as the president and COO, do you often keep track of stats, all those facts and figures as far as worldwide sales and what's been in this language, what's been in that language?
I do when we're pitching things. I mean, that's the whole fun of pitching things. Like if we're pitching something like Darkness, I talk about the video games, the toys, the statues. We've sold that book in 100 million different books around the world. So I mean, the stats are nice. It depends on the stats help. Like a book like Swing, where there's the books published in 27 languages, 57 countries. I mean, it's just a phenom. It's interesting how a book like that, like Think Tank, has only been published in English, because I quickly realized that there aren't too many countries around the world that like the U.S. military other than the U.S. But books about sex are universally loved.
And what are your thoughts on when I say the indie community, I'm not talking about like Image and Dark Horse, but like the really indie people that are going through Kickstarters, they don't have distribution. Have you had an eye on that part of the community? I mean, what do you think about, because people are talking about it's an indie renaissance and indie is getting bigger. I don't really know if I buy into that. I do think that some of the quality is better now because there's some more money funneling in. But I see most of the money's going towards booby books. So what are your thoughts on the really lower end indie scene? Or do you have any?
Well, look, I mean, that's where talent sometimes comes from, and it depends. I mean, I keep an eye on the Kickstarters because if there's someone I've never heard of before that generates 100 grand on some graphic novel, I want to know who they are. One of the things that's hard to explain to people is that it's very hard to break new artists and writers, and for the most part, if someone doesn't have an established following as a writer or an artist, I have a hard time using them at all because it's about mitigation of risk. I need to sell X amount of units. So I know if I write a book, it's going to sell X. I know if Cedric draws a book, it's going to sell Y. I know these factors will help sales because I have years and years and years of sales info to sort of facilitate that. With the independent marketplace, I mean, the quality is all over the board, but I've found a lot of really high-end gems in there of good stuff, and there's a lot of creators come from that world, and it just depends. I mean, it's like anything. I would say the vast majority. I get sent a lot of comics, and people ask me to read a lot of stuff, and I think there's some tremendous stuff in the indie world and there's some garbage, and it just depends on what it is. And sometimes it's the same from the same people. They're just trying to find their foot, that's why I always take a look at stuff, but for the most part, we're not really recruiting out of the independent market. Most of the people that come and work at Top Cow are fairly well established.
Right. Well, it's like you said, it's mitigation of risk. And that's pretty much all publishers at this point because you're the ones who are putting the money into marketing and covering the print runs, and no one's here to make business in business to lose money. So totally understandable. But in this day and age, we have the technology and the social media and the ability to self-publish, which is a great thing. But I had heard you say once, and I thought this was a fantastic statement. It's easier than ever to publish a book, but it's probably harder than ever to break into the industry to make money.
Yeah. Hard to make money, easy to publish. Yeah, because the thing is, you just go on and create an account on Line Webtoon and you're published. You put your book up and you're published. You put it up on Twitter, you're published. I mean, if you want to print it, you can just pay to have it done. It's so easy to do these days. But I know people that have been doing this for over a decade and have never made a dime. And I appreciate the love that they have for this thing, but this is business for me, and I don't have that same sort of love for it. So if I was not making money for a decade, I would do something else.
If you were a physicist, would you have been in research, or what would you have done with that degree that you have?
I was working on applied science, so I was not theoretical. It was more hands-on applied work. I was more on the engineering side.
Oh, very cool. Is there any part of you that misses? I mean, maybe misses isn't a good word because you can't miss what you hadn't gotten into yet. But is there any part of you that wonders what it would have been like to have been in that field and enjoyed it, or are you?
Yes.
Not looking back.
No, I've thought about that many times. In fact, in 1997, I almost left the industry and went back into that world. And the reason I did not, because that's when Awesome Comics collapsed. Extreme Studios collapsed, and then Rob's new company, Awesome Comics, collapsed. And at that point, I was pretty depressed. It was 1997. I was unemployed. I didn't know what to do. So I looked into the idea of going back into a research field or into that thing. But I realized it had been 5-6 years. And a lot of the people that I didn't want to go and do an entry-level job and be working for people that used to be my peers. And also the crazy part, I'd forgotten so much of it. When you don't use that stuff, especially when it's that intensive, I'm like, I couldn't remember certain things, and I knew that it wasn't going to happen for me. So I took a shot and did Lady Pendragon. I had done Lady Pendragon as a one-shot at Maximum Press, and I had wanted to do more, but it kind of had happened when Rob's companies were sort of faltering. So when Awesome Comics went down, I called Larry Marder a few weeks later, and I said, hey, what if I did this as an image book? Would you do it? And he said he would. And John Stensman and I did then 18 issues of Lady Pendragon. It was in my opinion, that's one of the more successful 90s to me, it was an indie book. People don't see it as an indie book, but Lady Pendragon was by a first-time writer and not a first-time artist, but we were not well known, and we just did it, and I go back and look at those books and I have a hard time reading them because I feel like I'm such a better writer today that when I go back and read that, I want to rewrite it. I want to cut some of those word balloons in half. I realize I was very verbose, and I was not checking myself for brevity, and now I would do that.
I bet you John, who's a really cool guy, looks back at his art and thinks he could do better too. I think that's just creators in general, right? I mean, the whole point is you're always progressing and trying to be better at your craft. And I think just through constant repetition, it's natural for you to get better. So yeah,
Yeah.
looking back, but it served its purpose, right? It kept you in the business. You enjoyed doing it. How did you hook up with Top Cow and Mark?
I had known Top Cow obviously because I was at Extreme, and one of the dirty little secrets of the early Image days is we at Extreme and Top Cow and Wildstorm, none of us looked at Marvel and DC as competition, and we looked at the other studios as competition. So Image was feeding on itself from the very early days, and Jim Lee was our enemy, and Mark Silvestri was our enemy, and we were trying to steal Mike Turner and Dave Finch. And the very first conversation I ever had with Mark Silvestri, and he laughs about this, was I was at Extreme as an editor trying to hire Mike Turner, and he called me up to tell me off. And, he did. He called me up and told me off. Yeah. And then 2 years later, I was at Wizard World Chicago, Rosemont there, 1998. And I was right next to Top Cow, and I had Alley Cat and Lady Pendragon, and we had a really successful show. And Brad Foxhall came up to me and told me that he was looking to quit and do something else. He was launching some .com thing with all that VC crazy money back then. And so he wanted to leave comics and was interested if I'd be in taking over that job. And so I came in as editor in chief. I was working under David Wall and Mark Silvestri. Within about 6 months that I was there, David Wall actually told me he didn't want to be president, didn't want to deal with the finance and the legal and all that sort of stuff. So I took that job, and since '99, I've been president of Top Cow.
How was Mark about that after having told you off, and here he sees you coming in and taking a position with the company? Was he cool with it, or did he have to warm up to you? Or
he had to approve the hire, and I mean, when I walked, I hadn't talked to him because I only talked to Brad and David when they hired me. So when on the very first day I was hired, he came in and shook my hand and laughed, and we had a nice chuckle about it. And I just said, "Look, now I'm your dog." That's why I remember saying that. I'm like, you can send me out. I'm like a weapon. I'll go target. But the thing about Top Cow is, the thing I liked about Top Cow is we didn't have to try to steal artists. All the artists wanted to work there.
Right. Off air or on the side someday, I heard a story that I'm going to ask you about, but we won't do it live.
Of course.
Yeah, you hear stuff. So let's go a little lighter. Favorite con moment?
Favorite con moment? I don't know. I mean, cons. Wow, I've been to probably thousands. I mean, I've been to 10, 15 shows a year for my entire career. I don't know. I mean, I remember the early days. Those kind of are a little more outspoken to me. I remember the Youngblood Battlecruiser. I remember Extreme Zero when it came out in 1994. I remember us having like 50 cases of those books, and it wasn't rare at all. And people were paying $100 a piece for those. And it was sort of an education of fake supply and demand, I suppose. You know what I mean? I mean, sort of that was interesting to me. And I'll never forget my very first San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, Rob asked several people that he trusted to bring back backpacks full of money. I mean, it's such a weird time. It's hard to explain. Like, I didn't take any money. I was terrified. I think I wondered if it was a test and it was counted and all these sort of things. So I don't know, but yeah.
We got a few questions here. Robert, if you can clarify, is there anything you passed on that you regretted? Can you clarify a little more on that, buddy? And
I'm sure he's talking about projects. Like, is that like a project that I've passed on, or an artist? Any project I've passed on that I've regretted? No, not one. Artists I've passed on that I regretted? No. I'm trying to think if there's any writers I've passed on that I've regretted. Probably. That's the one that's a little trickier, and it's hard to say, and people can approve dramatically. I mean, very quickly. Someone can write a bad script, and their very next script can be awesome. I mean, it's a strange thing. It just clicks. Something happens. So I never discount writers. But a lot of times, if I see an artist, especially for a number of years, and they seem to be the same, and I know that they might be getting a little better, but they're never going to be at a level that we're going to be able to use them. I try to be nice, but I mean, sometimes those people are really aggressive too, and that's the worst, is when people are really aggressive that you have no interest in.
Right. So, you've done editing, you've done writing. When you're doing the editing part, does that ever clash with the writer in you? Like, do you ever have to hold yourself back and say, I would have written it this way? And, does it affect you staying objective instead of subjective because you also are a writer?
I'm sure the answer to that is yes, but you'd have to ask the writers I work with. I actually don't know. I mean, I don't think that I do that. I actually don't think that I do that, but I probably do. I mean,
Well, if they haven't complained about it.
Well, I think here's the thing: being a writer has made me a vastly superior editor. I can tell you, my editorial skills leveled up dramatically once I started writing, because it's a whole different thing. Like when you're working with writers and you've stared at a screen, you don't know what to do, and you panic. When you've had that experience yourself, it's easier to help someone through that experience. And and like I think for me, it's just I tell people all the time. I said, if you can't write something, just write anything. I mean, write. I write, and I write very fast. My first drafts of things are done very quickly, and I usually keep about half of that. I mean, because I sort of crank through it. And a lot of times when I'm writing, if I can't figure out what to write, I'll just write whatever, or I'll leave it blank, and I'll move on to the other scenes and come back and fill it in later. But most times I'll just write anything. And sometimes if the dialogue is changed, and sometimes it's not, depending on when the art comes in. But to me, writing is all about rewriting. And when you write a draft, it sort of allows you to pace it out. It shows you where the weaknesses are. A lot of times it's hard to figure out where you're weak in an outline. And until you go and you do it, because sometimes when you're outlining things, the proper way to do stuff, but you don't do it that way on purpose just because you don't want to. So I don't know. I've become much more rigid about it. Like now, like I have a very much a formula on how I write and how I do things. I start with notepads, and I endlessly write in notepads and do all my research. That's my favorite part of writing, is that part. I actually don't like the physical process of writing much. I know a lot of women do, but I don't. The sitting down and actually typing into a computer is the least fun part for me. I like having written. When I have that book done and I know I wrote it, I love that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just tedious. Writing is tedious.
So, I mean, is that what you'd suggest then, as far as preventing writer's block, is just write anything when you get stuck,
Yes.
or
Yeah,
up?
write anything. Write it as quickly as you can, and write anything you want. And just think of something that would theoretically work, and then write it. And then often that process is what clues me into the right way to do it. Meaning, like if I write something wrong, then I fix it. Then suddenly that thing that was wrong wasn't wrong, because it led to what was right. So to me, there are steps, and sometimes I'll write, and then I don't think there's a single book I've ever published or written that has only had one draft that I've done. I may be other writers, but most books, 3 or 4 drafts. Swing Volume 1 had 14 drafts.
Oh wow! Meanwhile,
I didn't understand how to write it. Cedric had done Sunstone and had nailed that, and it had become Top Gal's best-selling book of all time. But writing romance was so different than writing science fiction or thrillers. It had a language all its own. It was very, very different. It was paced differently. It was a really hard learning curve for me, learning how to write romance.
And do you have any methods that you use to get in the mindset for the different genres? Like, going from a horror to a romance to a sci-fi to a military. Do you have a process or anything you do to help get yourself wrapped up in the mindset? Is it the research, or is there something you do?
Music. It's all about music. I mean, I listen to the music that's when I'm writing my fantasy book, I'm listening to World of Warcraft. I'm listening to, fantasy, Lord of the Rings, all that kind of stuff. And that stuff, that sweeping sort of inspiring music sort of carries you along. And, if I need to really get in the mode of something, I'll watch a movie, something relevant. It depends on the project. Usually by the time I'm writing something, I've already been immersed in it for months. You know what I mean? I tend to write one thing at a time, and so when I'm actually writing, my head is already sort of into the space. But like when I'm writing science fiction, I listen to the Tron Legacy soundtrack. I love Daft Punk for that. That Tron D-Res soundtrack really thumps and gets the heart rolling. there's some specific things I write for different reasons, and when I write romance, I listen to violin. I listen to there's a Bach cello suites and a romantic violin thing by, I think it's Vivaldi, that has a little thing. I listen to that. It's very sweet romantic music, and I don't know. I mean, that's for me. It's all about the music. Gets me in the mindset.
Well, that definitely evokes emotion, and emotion is what gets you into the mindset, I think. So that's cool. We're
Yeah.
getting some tips for writers out there. Keith he says he hopes you'll do another Cyberforce X-Men crossover someday.
Marvel alone, sure. I mean, we're down for that. I mean, Marvel and DC have really sort of cut back on the crossovers they allow other companies to do. There have been a lot of Marvel and DC crossovers even. So
I know
there's a lot less of that. And, I mean, we get pitched crossovers from a lot of indie stuff all the time. We don't do a lot of them.
I'm good friends with Billy Tucci, and I remember when he did the She and Cyblade crossover. Yeah, that was cool.
Huge.
Matt says, I love Alley Cat books. Do you still talk to the model from Alley Cat?
Allie Baggett. I actually spoke to her and I am about a month ago. It was the first time I talked to her in about 15 years. And
wow.
she's married, she's got a bunch of kids, and she's kind of off doing her thing. And I don't know if I didn't see a picture of her. She's not really on social media anymore. But she was a nice, there's some fascinating stories I have from that time period, but it was interesting to do. I'm actually I've been talking to the cosplay model Anamia about doing a project with her. I have a few ideas I'd like to do. I like sort of that. I've had crossover ideas where I want to do stuff where, like, my son is in film school, and I thought about, well, what if someone like him, he could go shoot a bunch of shorts, interstitial, like he could do some shorts for me on a project. So there's some other possibilities, but a lot of that other stuff is just for marketing. I mean, stuff you do for film and TV on a comic book project is just marketing.
Cool. And Sean asked, are there any non-Marvel and DC comics you would like to see on the big screen or TV?
Are there any that haven't made it already? Warlord from DC was one of my favorite characters that I don't even know if they still own the rights to. But when Mike Grell and those guys were doing Warlord, who was kind of an older hero, I don't know if you know, a lot of people don't even know who Warlord is.
Absolutely. But, and Mike Grell, I love Mike Grell.
Loved Warlord, was a huge fan of it. John
Sable Freelance, I love too.
Yeah, I don't think I read that one, but Warlord I really liked, and I'd love to see something with that. Like I said, when it comes to Marvel and DC, my knowledge of those two companies is not very deep. That's I learned more by listening to Rob Liefeld's podcast than I do from anything else. Like, he was talking about the High Samaritan or High Inquisitor. He was some podcast he was talking about today. He was talking about a bunch of characters that spin off of Namor. I didn't know who any of them were, but he was talking about that today. It's interesting. I love to learn about it.
Have you ever thought about doing your own podcast? And
yes. I do not like the sound of my voice. I actually was going to record a podcast about a few years ago before it blew up into this huge thing that it is now. And I recorded a few, and I wanted to call it Sex, Science, and Comics, because those are the three things that I was interested in. And I recorded a few episodes, but I didn't like how I sounded, so I killed it.
Oh, it's too bad. I don't know, man. We're our own worst critics, especially with our voices. I don't like my voice either, but, can't let it hold you back. I mean, you were the guy who had the balls to go up and say to Liefeld, never being in the comic industry before, hey, give me a job. So don't let this stop you.
I read Sean's question wrong. He actually said, are there any non-Marvel and DC comics you would like to see on the big screen? I read that as, are there any that haven't made it yet? That's not the question he asked. Are there any non-Marvel and DC comics you'd like to see on the big screen or TV? Oh, yeah, tons. I mean, I would love to see Bone. I always loved Bone. I thought it was Jeff Smith was so great. Any of Terry Moore's Strangers in Paradise, I think, would make a terrific TV show. I mean, I'd love to see ElfQuest as cartoons. I mean, there's so many that I think have been so great for so long. I mean, there's so many books of Image that have come out over the last 25 years that I thought were fantastic. One of the things that I have a hard time explaining to people sometimes is there are really well-written, well-drawn comics that come out all the time that no one reads, that people that don't catch fire. Right. I've seen that happen so many times at Image, where there's this great concept, this great book. It came out, it just didn't catch, and it's interesting.
That's the industry. See, yeah. I got to be honest with you. I find this so fascinating that you never read a book. You were never part of it. And here you are with a vast amount of knowledge. You've done so much in the industry. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that hate your origin story and they'll be pissed at it. I'm not. Hey, fortune favors the bold. Recognize the door is open, you go for it. I think that's a great inspiration. Nothing to be jealous of, but to be inspired by. But I do find it fascinating though, because I mean, you're into writing and you've read all these books and you've done editing. And so when you started editing sequential pages, did you know what you were doing, or
No,
did you take courses or?
no. No, when I started doing it, I was more like I said, when we were editors in the early line of work, we were more traffickers than editors for the artwork. I would say my editorial skills didn't get to the level of the title I had until probably mid 2000s.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's good to see you be honest about that. So you're like, oh yeah, I was great right away.
No, 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 no. Well, see, the thing is, I was never an English. I wasn't even an English major. English was not like my forte. So, I had to actually learn grammar. I mean, I didn't know how to edit, like copy edit. And now I'm sort of our go-to copy editor because I just fast and I can do it. Like I copy edited the Cyberforce hardcover when we went back and fixed a bunch of stuff. And it's I can do it very, very quickly. I don't know. I'm a quick study, and a lot of that stuff when there's rules to something. The nice thing about science and physics is there are rules. So, when you have rules on ellipses used in captions or quotations used in captions and so on, and how that works, it's just all somebody needs to do is teach me it once and I'll remember it.
Well, you did get a physics degree, so you can't be a dull knife.
Well, and I think, here's the thing, and I'm just being honest. I don't know how. Part of the reason why I think I shifted out of that is when I was deep into college and all of that stuff, I started questioning whether I really wanted to do that stuff because it was not that exciting. You know what I mean? I mean, and I have friends of mine who, one of my buddies, one of my high school friends who went to college with me, and we did the whole thing together. He works for Raytheon, and he's developing weapons for them. And he's a very senior engineer over there, and he lives here in El Segundo, and I have brunch with him about once a month. And he doesn't really talk too much about what he does, but I have a network. That's the other thing is I have a network of these guys that I know, people I've met over the years. In fact, I know a working 3-star general at the Pentagon because he came up to me at New York Comic-Con 4 or 5 years ago and had a bunch of questions for me about my think tank book. And when I explained to him that, my father was in the Air Force and he was an engineer and that's how I had this knowledge, he was very interested in it. And he asked me, he actually said, are you open to criticism? I said, yeah. He's like, and then he sent me a week later, like a bunch of things I had wrong. And and they're all very specific things. Like I had called a JSOC operation something else, and so he went in and gave me a lot of the details. And so that's where I've picked up fans over the years for these certain types of books, where when I'm doing a new book, I will send it to them and say, hey, give this a read and let me know what you think. Because now I have a network of my own people to sort of self-edit, and do that. Because one of the things I had a hard time finding is when you're the guy who cuts checks and pays people, people don't want to criticize you. So It became very difficult for me to find editors on my own work because, people didn't want to criticize me. And that's where I found Brian Hill. And Brian Hill is a guy who I believe revolutionized my writing, who I actually haven't seen in years, and I'm having lunch with tomorrow. So I'm very excited.
Oh, cool.
He's on, he writes the new Teen Titans show. Yeah. He's the showrunner for the spinoff. But I gave him his first work.
That's cool.
There's so many people that I was involved with. Like Rob and I gave Andy Park his first work.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the guy that does all the Marvel film posters.
Yeah.
He was an extreme guy. We found him at Wizard World Chicago one year, 94, I think.
I didn't know that. Oh, cool.
He was a sample guy. Just his submissions, and Rob hired him.
Keith was asking, did you read the Pat Lee's Warlands book back in the days?
I'm very familiar with Pat Lee. I'm not familiar with Warlands, no.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I'm familiar with Dark. Didn't he have Dark Minds, and he had the Transformers, and he had all that stuff from that one
Dreamwave.
studio. I read all that
Dreamwave.
Stuff. Yeah, I read all that stuff. Very familiar with all that stuff. And then, Pat moved to China and became, he's essentially heading up like their publishing efforts over there. It's interesting to watch some of these people. I love Pat. He's a good dude.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to him on the side about artists before, but I don't know him well. But he always seemed very nice. And of course, I loved what he was doing with Dreamwave. do you have a favorite or even just a crazy fan moment, like something that just sticks out in your mind dealing with a fan besides the military guy, the general?
Um, it's interesting when you have famous people that read your books, because I had the Fonz come up and talk to me once about one of my
Oh,
books, which
that's
was
cool.
kind of funds, and he does a lot of conventions too, and I've gotten to know him a little bit,
Did you
and
get the thumb?
he it was my favorite thing. Right after my first wife and I divorced, she came by my booth at a convention, and he came by and said hi to me, and it happened to be at the perfect moment where she could see it, and I was just like, right on, fuck you.
That's great.
No, it's interesting. Like the guy John Cormack, who founded id Software and wrote and did the coding for Doom and Quake and all those games back in the '90s, and he sort of was one of the people that was responsible for the building of like the Unreal Engine. Like he's a huge think tank fan, and he said he IMs me about that. And I when I go down to Texas, I hang out with him and I see him at cons, and it's just fascinating to me because and Jason Rubin is another one. He is I think Jason is I think he might be the president of Facebook, but he was a VR guy, and he was working on the Oculus Rift and a bunch of other things, and
Oh, cool.
he actually founded a company called Naughty Dog, which did Jack and Daxter and did Drake's Uncharted. He and he was reading comics, and it's just so interesting when you meet these people that are so pivotal to their own industry and often 100 millionaire type people, and they just read your comic and they're a fan and they want to talk to you about it. It's kind of a weird moment. That's happened to me a few times, and I don't know. I'm buddies with Seth Green and Milo Ventimiglia. I've worked with both those guys, and
Oh, cool.
I like working with those guys. They're cool.
Now, other mediums you talk about, you love video games, and of course you're into movies like everybody else and things like that. Do you ever have any plans or thoughts of expanding into those other mediums creatively? I mean, like video games, for example, or I mean,
Well, we have. I mean,
producing.
we've done Two Darkness video games. I've done a number of video game adaptation comics where we're involved in those things. And yeah, I mean, we've been very involved in the video game industry. In fact, if you look at the black Tomb Raider Lara Croft costume, Silvestri designed that. I mean,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, that was actually done in the comics. We've been involved in a lot of that stuff over the years. But in terms of film and television, we've always had some. And we had the Wanted film, which is based on the Mark Miller book we published.
Right.
There was the Two Darkness video games. We had the Witchblade anime and the Witchblade live action TV show. And we've had a number of other things we've been involved in, like Postal and Think Tank. Both have been developed for TV multiple times. Not been made yet, and hopefully someday it will be. But yeah, I mean, I have no interest in writing for film or TV or video games. I like getting involved in that stuff and the development of it, but I like writing comics. Despite the fact that I was never a big comic guy, I've learned how to write comics in a specific format. I work with the same group of artists that I really like, and I pay their, I could pay them salaries because I work with the same half a dozen people so regularly. They make good salaries, and so you become part of their lives. You meet their families and their kids, and you deal with their
Sure.
heartbreak. And honestly, the writer and artist is kind of like a marriage.
Oh, I agree. And if it works out, you've got that comfort zone, that symbiosis, because it's a lot for them to interpret your vision and your script, but also to be able to be comfortable with you to say, I think maybe this panel layout would work better than what you had in the script, which sometimes an artist will come back and maybe say that, and you have a nice balance between the two as long as there's no egos.
I encourage
Um,
that. I absolutely encourage that. It's a visual medium. The artists are superior in that to me, most of the time. And I work with very talented artists. So I'm not working with noob artists like young, unprofessional
right.
artists. So often I'm working with artists that have a lot more experience at the art than I do. So I tend to listen to them. Pat Boutine, who I'm working on this D&D thing with, I originally started writing it full script. And when he started changing the panel counts, like I have this conversation with them in advance that I tell them it's okay to do that. Cedric was the one that just he on Aphrodite 9 often did not follow my plots, and so there's whole segments of that storyline that have kind of been he and I kind of jointly riffed off of because he was changing things as we go along. It happens pretty often, like in Think Tank, Rasan Ekadal, the original general I wrote was a man, and Rasan just changed it to be a woman, and I just kind of rolled with it because I was like, who cares? It's just a gender thing. But then eventually, when I finished the storyline, I wrote it to where the reason why that general was able to beat my protagonist, David Lauren, was that she was a woman. And the reason why she was able to beat him was because he was a bit of a male chauvinist and he underestimated her. So, and so I
kind of threw off the whole.
I used it. Well, see, but it happens sort of naturally and organically. So I think it depends on. And to me, it's a collaborative effort. So I really don't understand writers who are dicks to their artists about it and telling them not to do that. I encourage every artist I work with to generate ideas, to come up with it. And as long as they're not materially changing the story, but if they're changing some panel layouts around. And once I've worked with artists for a while, like Yisin, Cedric, and Rasan Ekadal, and Atelier Rojo, all four who I've been working for years, I don't write full scripts for them. In fact, often I don't even write page breakdowns. I just write scenes. And then when they do the art, I'll script it.
Cool. Okay.
Like usually on Swing, I've never written script for that in advance, not once.
Really?
I'll write literally scenes. I'll say this is the scene. It's 5 to 8 pages, and this is what happens. And so that's sort of a slice of life thing about romance. It's a little easier to do. Like my scripts, like my sci-fi heavy duty scripts, are often very thick with links and reference photos attached. It's a fascinating thing to me because a lot of my hardcore fans love a book like Think Tank, which is really hard and time intensive for me to write. I spend a tremendous amount of time writing and researching, doing those books, and I don't make very much money doing them at all. And yet then I do a book like Swing, which is very little effort. I write it very quickly. There's no research whatsoever, and it sells millions of copies. It's go figure. If you'd asked me 10 years ago if my best-selling book would be a romance book, I would have laughed at you.
Well, you're tapping into the universal thing between us. We all want that love connection with somebody, right? So, it's as long as you know how to write it, they're going to seek it because that's what everybody wants.
Well, I think that the thing with Cedric and I have done with the romance categories, we've elevated a little bit because I think we write it a little smarter. The one thing I'll say about, I watch a lot of these Harlequin films because not Harlequin, the romance films.
Isn't Harlequin romance? Yeah.
Harlequin. What's the name of that channel that plays all those dumb movies that are all the same movie? My girlfriend loves those movies, so I'm forced to watch about one of those movies a week with her. And she justifies forcing me to do it because
Hallmark. Is it the Hallmark channel?
The Hallmark channel. That's it. Yeah, the Hallmark channel. I'll watch about one of those movies a week, and they're all the same freaking movie.
Right.
And so a lot of romance is garbage. I think that's why Sunstone and Swing have done so well, is because they're intelligently written. The people are smart. They're not doing stupid things, but the people are still fucked up. Even smart people do really stupid shit all the time. People tell me I'm smart. I've been divorced twice, and I've had all kinds of problems. So, it's interesting.
Now let me ask you, with your relationships and how they went down, do you think they helped bolster and strengthen your ability to write a romance novel?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Here's the thing I've come to realize. I've had a lot of failed relationships, but that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is I've had a lot of relationships. You know what I mean? And I've had 8 or 9 year plus relationships in my lifetime. In fact, my first wife, she and I were together for 18 years, and we have two beautiful sons. And my second wife I was with for 8 years. And the girlfriend I'm with now, I've been with for almost 3 years. So I tend to couple up, but the thing about romance, I realize, is the readership is primarily women. So I involve a lot of women in the project. You may notice that every single one of those books, the artists are all women.
Right.
My editor I use is often a woman. And whatever woman I'm dating, I often run the stories by and see what they think. Because women look at romance very differently than men.
Oh, agreed. We look at it a little more of a superficial level, and they're a much more deeper level. And how are you going to understand the source material if you're not going to the source, right? So,
yeah,
absolutely. So what do you do for your fantasy? Do you go find some? Do you go to like medieval times?
Well, like I said, the fantasy stuff I'm doing right now is based on the D&D campaign I ran for 30 years. So I ran a D&D campaign with some guys. By the way, I credit Dungeons and Dragons as giving me my ability to write, period. Because I played D&D since I was like 9. And I've been the game master. I created worlds and narratives and characters and
cool.
And would do voices and all that kind of crazy stuff. So writing those elaborate campaigns for all of these years, when I started writing comics, it's the same thing. You know,
So
it's
how's
just,
it feel when we were 9 and we were playing D&D? You had to keep that quiet with your little group, or it wasn't socially accepted. And now it's like the cool thing to be in the D&D group and the
yeah.
comics. It's like that changes. It's so weird. I don't know.
Well, it's I call it the Stranger Things effect. Now people seem to think that that it was always cool to play D&D, and it was not. No,
Right.
my parents were evangelical Christians, so my playing Dungeons and Dragons was even worse. You know, I
The
often
devil.
yeah, I had to hide it. We'd go to my friend Brian's house on Friday nights, and I'd often spend the night, and we would play over there. I ran the game, and I would keep all my books and stuff at his house because my parents didn't want me to have it because they thought it was demonic.
Wow.
I would
That's
go to
kind of like,
church and sit in church, and they would talk. And I remember there were a couple times where they were talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and I was just sitting there,
and you're
whatever.
like, shh, quiet. My parents are here, man.
Well, I
Well, it's
chose D&D over God, so I still play D&D, and I don't go to church. So there you go.
it's kind of like the mother from Waterboy. Foosballs for the devil.
Oh, the devil! The devil! Yeah, I love Kathy Bates, man.
Play foosball with your fans. Sean, how long does it usually take to write an issue of a comic? I know it's a little difficult to answer since you work on many things. Yeah, I think that depends on the writer, but yeah, for you, how long would you say it takes you? I mean, Swing is probably quicker, but
Yeah, I can usually write a comic in a week, given my schedule, and that's about what I do. I write about 20 to 25 pages a week, and whether that's a comic or part of a graphic novel or what it is, it also depends. Like I said, with a book like Swing or Swipe, where I'm writing the entire plot might be 6 pages long. You know what I mean? For a
right.
128 page book, I'm giving an artist a 6 page document. She then goes and draws, 98 pages, and then I'm given the 98 pages, and then I have to script it. I actually quite enjoy that process. That's actually my favorite process. Is that process is giving a plot. Is the old Marvel style, and see that's and Stan Lee sort of originated that because he didn't have time, and I have the same
Right.
sort of time constraints. So most of the artists I work with, in my mind, they're kind of co-creators, co-writers, and I give them all co-creator credit. I share. That's the one thing as the president of Top Cow, I get a good deal at Top Cow, and I always split my deals 50-50 with the artists.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome, especially when the big guys aren't giving much for royalties and things like that. And
Oh, you
it could
asked
be
any of
tough.
the artists working with me, they do quite well.
Very cool. Wish I could draw, but hey, I'll give you a stick figure variant if anytime you want. It'll be the best stick figure variant ever. It won't be straight, but it'll be a bent over stick figure.
Keith asked me a question. How is it working for Extreme Studios? I actually want to answer that. It was
I
awesome.
was going to get to that.
It was awesome. It was stressful, but I was in my early 20s. I didn't have kids. I didn't have any pets. I didn't have any debt. I was just working 20 hours a day and trying to learn the industry. And it was a bunch of young guys. We were all unmarried. We all hung out for endless amount of hours. And then Rob met Joy, and they got married, and everything changed. It was interesting. It was interesting to see how that sort of changed, where there was a core group of guys. It was Rob, Larry Marder, Marat Michaels, Dan Frega, Eric Stevenson, and myself. And we would hang out every day and talk comics and do these sort of things. And that was sort of the education. I look at, there have been 3 people that have had the most impact on me in my career directly. And that's Liefeld, Silvestri, and Larry Marder. Those 3 have had the most impact on me. The secondary, tertiary effects, probably Alan Moore, definitely a little bit of Garth Ennis, and a few others that I've worked with over the years that I've sort of learned from as I was editing them or working with them.
That was one of my questions, actually. So there you go. Did you ever get caught up in the party life, the nightlife of Image? Because I've heard a lot of stories about how it could be a big time party life in the beginning there.
I think here's the thing. I was at Extreme, and Extreme, even though it's called Extreme, was not the party company. You know what I mean? That was Top Cow and Wildstorm. We would hear these stories coming out of Top Cow and Wildstorm about the guys partying and having, doing these kind of things. But Extreme, Rob was a Christian kid. He people forget that, but Rob has always been a Christian. He still is. I've sort of renounced my faith, but Rob has always been a strong Christian guy. He's been going to Mariners down in Orange County for 30 years. And him and his wife and his family lead a very Christian lifestyle. And whether you like that or respect it or not, that's who and what he is. So given that, there was not a lot of alcohol and Rob doesn't drink, he doesn't do drugs, so He's been married to the same. Love him or hate him, the guy's been married to the same woman for 30 some years. He's got a beautiful family, and he's got his shit together.
Aaron, I'll answer your question. When you go and look at the rules, it'll list what is considered published and what is considered unpublished, what companies. So just go take a look, download the rules, and he lists the companies that would be considered published that you're not eligible. And if you're not one of those companies, you should be fine. I figured I'd spare you because you probably ask that all the time.
Yeah, here, I can post the link up.
Here. Okay. Hey, Greg Johnston, how are you? Thanks for coming out. Better late than never, but that's okay.
How do I post the link? Can I not post in chat?
Yeah, you should be. It doesn't let you.
Yeah, there's no chat. Oh, it's the private chat, but not the.
Let me see
comments.
If I can pull it. Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up. Copy link.
Yeah, I don't have a.
I got it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, man.
There we go. I just posted the link, and you can click that link, and all the rules are there. Because guys, I'm very serious about this. I've read it 3 times because I was tempted to to get my foot in this. But every question that you possibly can have is answered in it if you're just patient, take the time and read the whole thing. It really is. Every question that you need to know you would have is in there.
But the basic on the artist and the writer is if you worked for a top 10 publisher in any country, you don't qualify. So if you worked, and the list is Marvel, DC, Valiant, those and so on, Image. If you've been published by any of them, if you haven't and you've only been published independently, you're fine.
Cool. So usually before we end the interview, I ask this question, and actually my wife had come up with it years ago, and I ask every guest this question. So I really like this question. It catches people off guard, but I like to get the honest answer. If you could go back in time and when you first started out in the industry, knowing what you know now, the experiences you've had, etc., what advice would you give yourself?
Start writing a lot earlier, because the books in the early Image were selling so many. To this day, Lady Pendragon #1 is my best-selling book of all time. Do you know how shitty that is for my first book, which in my mind is one of the worst things I've ever written, to be my best-selling book of all time? It's a function of the fact that the industry, was selling a significantly large. There were 15,000 comic stores in 1994. There's about 800 now. I mean, so that's you're looking at a significantly different install basis. And there were 8 distributors back then. Now there's 3 again, but there used to be just 1. So. Yeah, I would have taken advantage of those early Image numbers, because I know a few guys that did made $5-10 million in 2 or 3 years, and
Wow.
their lives are pretty chill.
Wow. Well, I do appreciate you coming out to talk with me. I met you not too long ago. You were very kind and accommodating from the start. You actually were very kind and helped out with something I had asked you. And I do appreciate that. I know you have a lot going on, but I have to tell everybody, Matt is a very approachable guy. He's a really cool dude. And when you go see him at shows, really go say hi, pick up a book, at least one book, and shoot the breeze. He's very, very, very good at extending the olive branch. And I do thank you for the times you've helped me out, or your efforts, and I am appreciative of that. Before we go, if there's anything you want to plug or say, please do, and we'll wrap it up.
Well, the other thing I would say, what we're pushing right now is obviously the Batman Joker Deadly Duo team up, but we did do 3 Top Cow variants. We talked about those exclusivity things. We have a couple of those at topcowstore.com. So if you are a Mark Silvestri fan, the first issue is available, and we have a couple of variations if you're into that kind of thing. If you just want to read something, I wouldn't. If you want to read something of mine, if you go to topcow.com, there's a free comics section. The first volumes of Think Tank, Postal, and The Tithe are all there for free. You're welcome to download and read them and see what kind of stuff I do and what kind of stuff I write. I think those are probably, if you read those 3 maybe swing volume 1 on top of that. You get the best sort of picture of who I am as a writer. And if you like my stuff, one of the things I really I believe in sampling. I don't especially want you buying and reading my books if you're not going to enjoy them, because there's no point to that. And I don't really want anyone to ever pick up and buy one of Top Gal's books and then go home and say they didn't like it. So for me, it's all about sampling. And any book that you're not sure about, go to topgal.com. You'll see often almost every book we publish, we put the first issue up for free by the time the trade comes out, because that way you can go and read it, see if you want it, and then buy the trade. So I'm all about sampling and trying to get people to the content they want, because the one nice thing about this industry is, as a writer and a creator, if you're cool to people and you write good, consistent stuff, you can build a fan for life. And a lot of people that have been reading my books are the same people that have been reading for 10, 15, 20 years. I do these conventions. I see the same faces. Sometimes I see new faces, but I'm happy to see the same faces because I know they're still there. And here's the other dirty little secret about comics. You don't actually need that big of a fan base to make a good living. I mean, I bet I have 10,000 hardcore fans, maybe 100,000 casual worldwide. And on the 10,000 hardcore fans that read my book, I make a very good living.
Hey, you could be as cool as Fonzie. Fonzie's a fan.
Nah. It's so funny though. You meet that guy in real life, he's not like that at all. Henry Winkler.
I know.
He's so different from the Fonzarelli sort of image that it's kind of hard. It's weird to talk to him. He kind of is more of the, if you've seen Waterboy, that's more who he is than Fonz. And I don't mean that as a diss. He'd say it himself.
Right.
So.
And lastly, if you just want to one more mention of the Top Cow Talent Hunt.
Yeah, the Top Cow Talent Hunt ends November 30th, so you have 15 days. Is it possible to write a comic in 15 days? Yes. Is it possible to draw 8 pages of a comic in 15 days? Yes. So you could, in theory, still enter, and even if you have not started yet. It is an unparalleled opportunity because you will actually get published if you win, and you get paid for it. So it's not like it's a freebie thing. A lot of these talent hunts, they tend to, you're doing the work for free. And they're making the money off of you kind of to give you an opportunity. Just something I learned under sweepstakes laws in the United States, technically that's illegal. So just so you know, if you win a contest and someone is publishing your work for free, they're actually violating what's called the sweepstakes laws in the United States.
I didn't know that. Interesting. Very cool.
So.
All right. Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming out and spending time with us. I really wish you the best of success. Mark as well. Like I said, he just keeps getting better and better. He's a nice guy. You obviously, you just get better and better, and you write great stuff, and you're hitting different genres and different demographics, and you have something for everybody. So I wish you the greatest of success. I appreciate your time, and good luck to your son with his film school.
I hope he does well. Yeah, I got big plans for that boy. He's got to make some movies for me and my stuff. That's my plan with him.
There you go. Top Cow Productions, produced and directed by your son.
Yeah, exactly. So
that'd be great.
Cool. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thanks for having
me. So that was Matt Hawkins, COO and president of Top Cow Comics, as you know. Again, really cool guy. Go check out the talent hunt, the Top Cow Talent Hunt. If you're an artist or a writer, there's an opportunity for both of you. You don't get hired by Top Cow, but you will get paid and published for a one-shot title. Okay, so please go check that out. That's what's going on there. Thanks to all of you for coming out. Please forgive me. I got to do my quick little plugs. I won't drag this out forever. But just to remind you that right now, going on Kickstarter live is the Legendary Illustrations art book campaign, which is doing very well. And we're very grateful to everyone who's shared, pledged, thumbs up, comments. You guys make this happen. These artists are hungry and they're working hard. And we need you. We absolutely need you. We love you and we appreciate you. Even if you don't pledge, we just appreciate the support. But if you have it in you, if you're able and you do love quality art for really affordable prices, this is the campaign. I'm not going to go too long, guys. I'm not going to batter you over the head with this, but please just stick with me a few minutes. Don't leave the room. Check this out. This is the campaign. We're at $3,584. We had funded in less than 90 minutes, 52 backers, 6 days to go. Hit that green back this project button, or even to remind me so you know when we're going to end. We have amazing art books, and just to show you, these are the art books. We got really quality artwork from legendary illustrations artists. There's 7 books. You could buy all 7. You can get a pick 3. You could buy one individually. And we do have some original art tier commissions left. You can commission some of these artists for a full figure, full background, inked character, 11 by 17, character of your choice. We just don't do your own creator-owned IP. I'm sorry, but for legal reasons, fan art is fine, but it can't be the character you created, because we can't be looking at that become a cover somewhere. It's just unfortunate that people do that. So we have some amazing books. These, I have them here with me. Of course, I moved them. This is samples of the art. They are floppy comics, but they're like 40 to 50 pages each. And you get the PDF. So you don't only get the physical book, but if you buy the physical book, but you also get the PDF. You can print these up at 11 by 17 and have posters all over your wall. A print costs $20 to $30 at a convention now. Well, you're getting 40 or 50 for $20. And the Carlos Ramos book, because it's less pages, it's only 26, is $15. So it's a steal. I mean, look at the artwork, the quality work you get. It's amazing. So I'm asking you to please give it a check. You also get a free die-cut sticker by Will Playton of Ghost Rider, a free bookmark of Batman by Will Playton, and we're close, just over $1,000, and we get to this free comic-size print, full color of the Space Ghost and the Phantom Cruiser by Kenny Calderon. We want to give you free stuff on top of the really affordable art, so help us give you free stuff. All right? That's it on that. One last thing before you go. Don't go anywhere. This is a really important project to me. It's very near and dear to my heart. And it means a lot to me. And it's going to launch December 1st. And it is my first and probably only prose book that I'm ever going to write. It's a short story, theological fiction book. Beta reading has been great with the reviews so far. It's only a 21-day campaign. It's going to start December 21st. I'm just going to show you the video real quick, and then we'll get moving, all right?
Have you ever had your faith and spirituality shaken? Has life had you questioning how and why bad people exist? Why we slave at jobs we hate, or why bad things happen? Do you look inward at what motivates you to keep moving forward despite the hardships of life? These 7 short tales explore the many possible reasons and motivations in an interesting and fictitious way. You don't need to be religious to enjoy these tales that intend to inspire. We may not have all the answers, but these stories make you think of possibilities many never considered.
All right, so that's it for that. And just so you know, the first short story in this book is called Withered. It is going to continue as an ongoing comic book illustrated by Will Playton himself, coming in March 2023. Please keep a watch out for Philbo Publishing. We've got some big news possibly coming in the new year. We have big plans. Things are going. Anybody who knows me knows I'm balls to the wall, take no prisoners. I'm going to go straight for the, I'm going for the gold. I'm hitting the top of the mountain, guys. I'm working hard. I'm moving. I'm shaking. And I want to bring everybody along for the ride, unless they get there first, of course. So please keep an eye out, Philbo Publishing, Legendary Illustrations. We have a Kickstarter every month going through April. All right. So thanks for sticking around. I appreciate everybody who came out to talk with Matt tonight and myself. We appreciate everyone that supports us, myself especially. I cannot thank everyone enough for all the time, money, effort, shared posts, likes, comments, well wishes, positive DMs that you've all given me. I mean, God bless you all. I appreciate you, and I wish you as much success as you desire in this world, because you have given me so much. And I really mean that. I never thought I'd be pursuing a publishing company and putting out books, and it's all because of you guys. So I want to say thank you. And one of the worst moments in my life, when I was ill to the point of almost passing away, it launched some amazing things in my life, and I finally got that direction. I know where I want to go, and the life, the career I want, and you all are making that happen. It's just amazing. So I really appreciate all of you. Thank you. So with that, I'm just gonna say, keep your chins up, guys. Storms come, but they also go. The sun always rises. The tides always, ease up. The waves ease up. Just stay strong, stick in there. And like Matt said, don't be afraid to take advantage of an opportunity. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. And when that door opens, you put your foot right through that door. You go through that door. You do not hesitate, because fortune favors the bold. It's not just hard work, it's taking risks without fear. Be fearless. Use good judgment, but be fearless. Anyway, I appreciate you. Have an awesome night. And I'm going to leave you with what I always leave you with. Be legendary and have fun storming the